$1 trillion, that is the current value of India's retail market, nearly a third of the country's GDP. By 2030, this figure is projected to surpass $2 trillion. A report by Accel, Fireside and Redseer predicts that 90% of consumption will continue to occur offline. Surprisingly, online penetration will only increase marginally from 7% to approximately 10% by the decade's end. So, is the era of click and order fading in the face of brick and mortar's long-standing reign? Well, not at all, asserts the report. It's not about online versus offline, rather a shift towards online and offline, where the shopping journey, uniquely Indian, is characterized by a mix of traditional values and modern conveniences. A prime example of this model in action is being seen in omni-channel jewelry brands like BlueStone or Carrot Lane. Customers discover designs online, then evaluate the fit and comfort in store. Now, this new market expects you to be where the consumer is. In fact, leaders of India's D2C revolution, Nykaa, Mamaearth, Lenskart, First Cry have all embraced the concept and are leading by example. From fast fashion to pet care and smart mattress makers, D2C startups that raised funding in 2023 and in 2024 have all outlined a strategic offline expansion roadmap. And now they must walk a more agile, flexible and responsive journey than any of their predecessors. And at what cost? What is the playbook of taking your business offline? And in many cases, these young companies are competing with legacy brands and conglomerates. And importantly, at a time when we've seen the focus on profitability, how much cash burn is kosher? Hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shereen, Bhan. We are now joined by Prashanth, Prakash, partner at Accel, Kanwaljit, Singh, managing partner and founder of Fireside Ventures. Also with us on the show, Gaurav, Kushwaha, the founder and CEO of BlueStone. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Plenty of interesting insights coming in from that report. So, Prashanth, to you first. I summed up very briefly the key takeaways from the report that Accel, Redseer have put out. But what, to your mind, are the standout, the headline numbers as well as the headline insights?
So I think there's two really standout things about this report, Shereen. One is that this report is not just a kind of a status of the ecosystem and just case studies from some of the trailblazers that you discussed. We wanted to see how we can create almost something like a toolkit, right, which will have the right ingredients for these next generation of brands who are going from being 50 to 100 crores just online to 1,000 crores, with an omni-channel strategy. So our idea was we give them the right ingredients so that they can create a playbook that works for them. And the reason why we think that this you can't just be prescriptive in this journey is that based on the product and based on your customer, I think there are just so many nuances and so many details and specifics that it needs to almost be a tailoring toolkit. And that's what we have done through this report.
Well, a tailoring toolkit, and I'll get you, the toolkit has taken on a whole other meaning in the recent past, but I'll get you to take us through what the toolkit in fact puts together as things that people need to focus on. But let me get Kanwaljit into the conversation. Kanwaljit, this takes me back to a conversation that I had with Rohit Java, the MD and CEO of HUL, in February actually this year. And this is what he said, on digital brands. He said, as far as digital brands are concerned, they're digital in the sense that they're digital first and not digital only. So they have to go beyond D2C platforms to the marketplace. And then they have to go to stores and pharmacies offline. And we know that game. That is where we are. We've already backed that playbook, so to speak. So this also tells you about the opportunities that exist, Kanwaljit, but also the challenges of going omni-channel and building yourself out, not just online, but also offline. Through your own experience, and many of your portfolio companies are in the middle of that transition, have made that transition as well. What would you put in that toolkit?
Awesome. So, Shereen, thank you for having me. I think the comment by Rohit is extremely, I would say, relevant, but also it's a great insight into what is possible. So, the whole idea of digital first brands really takes off from the opportunity of talking to your consumers directly, being able to get data, being able to understand the product market fit. But there was never any, intent or belief by any of us that these are only digital brands. The interesting, I would say, dynamic that we are seeing in the market is it's not online versus offline or even online and offline. It is one seamless customer experience if you can create. So I would start by saying simplistically that there are playbooks that need to integrate the online versus offline, whether it is in terms of how you are acquiring customers, how you are building the brand with the customers, how you are taking them on a journey which can move from online to offline or back to online, and different models which are facilitating that. So I think to me, the moat of the large players, and of course, Rohit is a dear friend, Hindustan Lever is a great bellwether in this space. But I would say that the game that the new age brands are playing is actually very different than, say, what a Hindustan Unilever is playing. So I would feel very optimistic that there's a great opportunity to build large new age brands in India today in the omnichannel context.
Yeah, and I think if the moat was the distribution side, the distribution muscle and the distribution power, now using the online route, I think discoverability and then being able to take the message to the consumer, that moat perhaps less solid in comparison to what we've seen previously. But let me get Gaurav into the conversation as well. And Gaurav, I want to understand from you, as the founder of BlueStone, as somebody who has made the transition of creating an omni-channel experience for the customer, to add to what Prashanth and Kanwaljit have said, take me through what have been the big learnings for you on this journey so far and what you now intend to incorporate as you scale up the offline side of the business.
So in our case, specifically, in fact, for a lot of high-touch categories, what we have realized is people want the ability to actually go through lots and lots of designs, lots and lots of product offerings online, and that browsing, that discovery, that research is best done online, and there are numerous examples of that. Let's say if you're buying a car today, or if you're buying jewelry, or if you're buying a mattress, so categories which are very involved purchase, things that you actually buy once in, let's say, a year, 2 years, or 5 years, you want to be very sure that you're actually buying the right product, and doing that research online is way more convenient than doing that in store, or then actually going to, let's say, 50 different stores and doing that research. What also is important is the ability to actually look at the physical product before making that decision. And it goes for all the high-touch categories: cars, beds, mattress, jewelry, and so on. So I think our biggest learning is that for different categories, omnichannel takes a different form. So for high-touch categories, I think it's your own portal, let's say, versus Flipkart and Myntra's for low-touch categories, right? Your own stores. So essentially, so those are our big learnings, essentially, that omnichannel will actually take different forms for different categories and for different use cases. But I think one of the things which is very, very clear is business which is thinking of whether online versus offline is going to struggle big time. I think customers are not online or offline. A person is wherever that person physically, the person always has a device in their hands. They always are checking whether it's going to a doctor, whether it's buying a house, whether it's buying a car, whatever it is. Online is playing a more and more meaningful in their purchase decision making.
No, absolutely. And I know I completely agree with each one of you. And I think, just speaking from our own experience as a brand, and we are a consumer brand at the end of the day, CNBC-TV18. We've been a television brand for the last 25 years. But over the last few years, I would say in the last 3 years specifically, we have made a conscious decision of going to the consumer where the consumer wants to consume us, as opposed to having the arrogance of saying, if you want to watch us, then you have to watch television. So I think that is, as you're rightly pointing out, you have to customize and you have to go to where the consumer wants to consume you, not the other way around. But Prashanth, coming back to the toolkit, and let's sort of, address the basic questions now. In your experience, and while putting this report together, when is that inflection point, or when should a brand consider going offline, taking that route as a digital-first brand?
Yeah, so this is a very complex question in some ways, because it is very different for different brands, and how they choose the right time to do it is also a very involved kind of thought through decision making process. And in this guide, we give them certain, certain kind of call outs on how they make that choice. And what we have seen is that your customers really are the best judges for that. And you start hearing from your customers that, is there a store that I can come to? I love your product, but, is there a way I can experience your product? So I think it's important that you listen to your customer, and your customer is starting to and also, Shereen, it's very different in the top 10 cities versus the 110 cities that I think are today premiumizing, looking at mass premium products, are aspirationally there, but are at a very different stage. And in terms of what is the experience so there is product discoverability. They have discovered the product. As a brand, you're in the consideration set, but they just want that one trust building experience that converts that into a purchase. So what we are seeing is that there are multiple reasons why and when somebody should look at making this transition, and we talk about that in this guide, and we kind of help them customize that again.
Yeah. So let's address that issue, Kanwaljit. And in your 7-year journey of working with some of India's best D2C brands, I want to understand from you, when that decision came that, we now need to expand and become omni-channel, move more towards becoming omni-channel. What were the key considerations? And as Prashanth was also pointing out, look, we are a large consuming market. Forget about the geographical disparities. Look at the income inequalities and the income disparities as well of the market that we're dealing with. So how do you design, how do you curate a offline strategy that works for you? What were the key factors some of your portfolio companies, for instance, considered before making that plunge?
Sure, Shereen. So I think there are 2 or 3 important learnings for us over the last 7-8 years. First of all, I think digital has enabled a lot of discovery in terms of not just consumer discovering the brand, but even the brand understanding where is the product market fit, what are consumers saying about it, doing short experiments to figure out, what is working, what is not working. And that, entire combination of, if I may call it consumer love or consumer, acceptance of your brand, then starts giving you the confidence that there is a demand for my product. This is why consumers want me and want to consume me. And therefore, now the question is, how do I design for a larger, channel complexity and a larger channel choice? And I think that's where we have found some interesting new models that have started working. I think first model is, a great example is a sleep company, which is one of our portfolio companies, where we found that, setting up an offline store is a great way for consumers to experience that final touch. I think Gaurav talked about that earlier as well.
Yeah.
And that is all they need. They don't need to go and pick up a mattress from a store and take it home. They are comfortable in ordering on the same platform. They are comfortable of it being delivered a few days later. But that feeling of, very often customers we see come in actually will want to lie down on the mattress, experience the actual, how hard it is, does it suit my kind of body type and all that. That is one example. Similarly, for Mamaearth, we found a very different case in point, where the consumer started writing into the company saying, I love your products, I would like to buy them at my local store. And is there a way that I can reach them? So that then becomes another signal of looking for those choices. And similarly, we found that there are different models that work, and therefore designing for your offline strategy or omni-channel strategy is a matter of reading those signals, integrating the channels into one consumer journey. I think that's an important learning for us. It is not 2 parallel tracks. These are integrated journeys. And if you can design for that, you start building on the offline strategy.
Well, I think that's a very important point that you make, that, don't make the mistake of building two parallel tracks, but you have to have one integrated track that the train is on, or there is a chance of it being derailed. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I did go to a sleep company store just to be able to experience what that product was, even though I discovered it online, and it made a world of a difference. But Gaurav, coming to the complexities of this integration that Kanwaljit is talking about. And again, I want to understand from you, for instance, you guys actually had to do the reverse. You had to build out the online model in India, given the fact that this is such, you're dealing with the jewelry segment, which is not just high touch, but high trust as well and high value. So you had to actually do what was not being done. And offline, perhaps in many ways, is the simpler aspect, isn't it?
Truly, Shereen. So essentially, if you look at it, most of the offline or most of the traditional companies would have generally outsourced technology, right? They would be using off-the-shelf systems and solutions and so on. So now extending those systems and those solutions to the online world, and not more than online, actually integrating the systems together is a non-trivial job. It's actually a very, very difficult job. But if you look at almost all the online first companies, they had their own tech stacks and so on. So technologically extending that to stores is a much easier job to do than for offline companies to actually extend their tech or create one more or have one more technology stack for online, and then they're integrating the two stack. Also, fundamentally, retail has been around for a very, very long time. So the organization structure, the kind of skill set available in the market, etc. When an online company is looking to set up a retail organization, retail practices, we get a lot to choose from, because it's it has evolved over the last 25 to 30 years. But if you look at the online skill set, it's first of all, it's ever evolving, and secondly, it's not more than 10 to 12 years old. So you won't get a lot of experts of the online world who can actually join in, let's say, an offline organization and then make a transition and help them transition from an offline only avatar to an omni-channel avatar. I think those are two of the things which actually which work in favor of the folks who have started online, and the result that we are seeing is most of those companies are actually conquering omni-channel much better than the traditional offline companies.
Yeah, fair point. So what's the plan now? By the end of this fiscal year, Gaurav, how many offline stores do you intend to set up?
So currently we have 193 stores spread across 70 plus cities. We have been expanding very aggressively for last 5 years. 5 years back, we had set up our first store. And this year also, we'll continue to add stores very, very aggressively. Cannot put a number to it right now, but the expansion is going to be aggressive.
Expansion on the cards, aggressive expansion that you've seen on the offline side over the last 5 years. I'm going to try and elicit a response from you on whether we're going to see an IPO in this financial year or not.
I don't know. I can't say. I don't know.
You don't know. That's the short and simple answer there. I don't know is Gaurav's take. But Kanwal, coming back to you now, through the experience of some of your portfolio companies, what have been the key mistakes and the course correction that you've seen along the way as they've made that shift from just being digital only to being omni-channel?
So I think the first one is clearly treating it as two independent tracks, like I talked about it earlier. I think the second one is trying to do too much too soon, especially in how you expand. I think one of our biggest learning is that the offline world is a very complex, organism, if I may. And, understanding if you're launching EBO stores, then, literally starting with one store, understanding, what is driving consumer traffic, what are they looking for, what kind of unit economics are you getting in those kind of, stores, and then expanding maybe within the city, then understanding a city dynamic, and then going into a larger expansion. Similarly, if you are going into, for example, the more traditional, trade, whether it is modern trade or it's general trade. Once again, our learning has been start with a small cluster, understand what is the opportunity in terms of what kind of customer for traffic, what kind of strategies work there. Do you need to have assisted sale? Do you need to have some kind of a promotional activity? So all of that, I would say, is the first port of call in understanding, like any new launch, is what are the drivers of success in those markets. I think the second thing is that integrating some of these learnings, like for example, if you have a deep data, and I'll take an example of one of my personal investment in a company called Licious. Now, in Licious, they found that there were a lot of hotspots where a lot of customers are ordering their meat and their meat products in those clusters all across the country. Now, once they have that almost like a heat map, then you start thinking about saying, maybe I should design for my retail location in those markets. So once again, this is a great integration of data and how do you translate that to offline. So I think it is very much a game where you have to take a few baby steps. You're dealing with inventory, you're dealing with distribution, and therefore the critical driver of success here has to be how do you manage inventory, cash flows, working capital, and not just pushing sales into the store and showing it as revenue. So I think those are some of the guardrails that we would advise our companies to be very thoughtful about.
Yeah, Prakash, coming back to the insights as far as the report are concerned, which categories at this point in time where you believe that the transition has happened and perhaps those are poised now for significant scale? Which are the categories that you believe will do well in making the transition, and which are the emerging categories that you see benefiting from this omni-channel approach?
Yes. So I think some of the categories such as electronics, and some of them have really made that online almost online only now presence, right? But I think when it comes to fashion, I think we are starting to see definitely an omni-channel play there, and it continues to be, both scaling online and definitely there are certain kinds of fashion and style-led categories that also are doing well offline. But I think there are new categories, especially in where there is customer experience. So, for example, there is a company in our portfolio called Rento Mojo, which allows you to rent anything for your home. Now, this is a category which did not exist in the country, right? And because people are not used to renting everything for their home. Now, you need to give people an experience where they see, okay, what is the quality of what I'm renting? Is it of good quality? Is it, because they don't know what they're going to get when they're going to rent a used product. So I think we see a lot of these new categories that were not there at all as, categories before. Then in fashion and lifestyle, I think there will be a continuous set of new brands, new experiences that we see a lot of new omni-channel offtake in.
Kanwal, outside of the omni-channel route, just a broader take on where we see things as far as the e-commerce market is concerned. I mean, through the steroidal growth that we saw through the pandemic, and of course then the normalization, where are things as we look at them today? What do you feel confident of? What are you concerned about? And again, since we always get you on spotting new trends, anything exciting on your radar at this point in time?
Sure. So, Shereen, I think e-commerce itself, there is a 2.0 which is starting to emerge. Clearly we see that there is a growing, opportunity to reach accessed areas, going deeper into smaller towns, going deeper into even tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 towns. And sometimes you need to almost design the business models to suit those kind of markets. And, we have recently invested in a company called Rosanna, which is doing assisted commerce in rural India. Now, that is a completely different way of manifesting an entire catalog of products, but you need to have somebody on the ground to help the consumer in making those choices. So that is one direction. I think quick commerce is certainly disrupting the overall commerce space in a very big way, and we are starting to see even categories like groceries and FMCG and some of the packaged food kind of products, which were finding it much more difficult to be sold because of unit price being smaller on e-commerce channels, now becoming far more amenable on the quick commerce channels. So on the digital side, we believe that it will continue to grow. I think Prashanth mentioned that earlier. We are seeing even in the report that the growth of the online digital channels, the total size of that category is growing faster than offline. But obviously, offline will remain the dominant point of purchase for most consumers. On the trend, Shereen, clearly, we are seeing almost multiple Indias emerging. We believe that, the urban India, what we call India 1, there is going to be far more premiumization. We are already seeing consumers looking for experiences. We are seeing them looking for personalization. So there is a whole trend where, you need to have those ability to touch and feel, to be able to, experience what you're buying, not just the product, but the overall, the experience. Similarly, India 2 is all about value. How do you deliver me a great product, but at the right price? There's supply chain, efficiencies, the ability to manage the entire, distribution of those products at the right price points. And then like rural is just about starting to open. So that is one, I would say, interesting opportunity we are seeing in each market behaving differently, and therefore how do you design brands for each market is going to be an interesting opportunity. Then the second big one, which we're seeing very, very exciting opportunity, is this whole trend towards more wellness and more health. And consumers are starting to take much more notice about, the pack of pack, notice about, what they are consuming, both inside and on their bodies. And of course, even in consumer health, we are starting to see a lot of self-care, a lot of consumer-driven healthcare, almost awareness and desire, rather than just depending on, say, the traditional method of going to hospitals and doctors and so on.
Yeah, well, that is emerging as a big category. And of course, the Supreme Court is at this point in time looking at a whole host of issues. This is a fallout, of course, of the Patanjali matter. So what can be advertised? What kind of disclosures will need to be made? I mean, there's plenty that's going on at this point in time that is still work in progress. But Gaurav, I want to end with you. I was just taking a look at the revenue trajectory between FY20, 35 crores, FY24, 1,200 crores plus, of course, big aggressive plans offline as well, perhaps an IPO also. But, how confident do you feel about continuing to grow revenues? And are there any new innovative ways that you are using at this point in time to reach out to new consumers and draw back existing consumers?
Yeah, so Shereen, in our category, essentially, so there are a few fundamental shifts which are happening in our category. And so I'll talk about those three shifts. So first is essentially a shift from unorganized to organized. A lot of people are actually moving to different cities, and as a consequence, they actually are moving away from their local jewelers, the traditional jewelers, and they're actually shifting to branded jewelers. Second shift that is happening is a lot of women, today's generation actually prefers everyday jewelry over, let's say, heavy, big wedding kind of jewelry. All big pieces are being replaced with smaller pieces. And I think third shift which is happening is this whole emergence of omnichannel, where people are using online more and more to discover the products, to discover the brands and so on. And so online is becoming more and more important in everyone's purchase decision making. In BlueStone, we are actually beneficiary of almost all these three tailwinds. And hence I feel that in general, I think for a very long time, we'll continue to see these tailwinds playing in our favor.
Okay, Gaurav being very, very careful with what he's saying, and I would imagine that is on account of the fact that they are possibly looking at going public sometime soon. But we will leave that conversation for another day. Gaurav, Kanwal and Prashanth, always a pleasure. Many, many thanks for joining us here to talk about the big insights from the report that you've just put out, but more importantly, how we see the omni-channel play for India's D2C brands. It's not online versus offline or online and offline. It will have to be an integrated track. That's the consensus emerging from the panel. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Young Turks. From all of us here on the show, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.